Hello again, everyone. Good afternoon from the Department of Urban Planning. My name is Lauren Deek. I'm an Associate Professor of Urban Planning, faculty member in our first year program. I'm going to be talking to you today a little bit about how we can use some more artistic side of collage combined with composite drawing and other types of architectural drawings and how all those things can kind of come together for this final presentation. How collage can be a way of spicing up, enhancing, adding value, adding enhancement to architectural drawings, whether they be plans, sections, or axonometrics. Some interesting artistic ways of really enhancing architectural drawing and enhancing presentation drawings. Going back into some history, we have some wonderful examples of some one of the more radical examples of how collage can come together and create these interesting futurist proposals. The design firm Archigram, which was more of an architects and artists collective that didn't really build a lot of buildings, but rather published a magazine that really forced a lot of impressed a lot of interesting new architectural thinking, architectural concepts, and even some futuristic ways of rethinking about the city, using plan, section, elevation, and elements of collage. Some of the more radical or whimsical ways of rethinking about how cities might come together in the future, including this version here, the floating city, which involves a very large blimp or dirigible floating in and then starting to activate the urban fabric. I think it's very much in line, perhaps, with some of the invisible cities that you've been studying this semester. Other concepts that they came up with that became pretty well known, including walking city. Again, this is late 60s, early 70s, the idea that an entire city could basically walk into a site and plug into utilities and resources and things of that nature and start to activate a barren or desolate portion of a city and plug right in with other portions of it. Other interesting methods of combining really rich architectural drawings with collage. The folks who put together this magazine were prolific collage artists, so they were always clipping things and adding things into the drawings. These are axonometrics here emerging from the ground plane, but then combining them with newspaper clippings and magazine clippings from the time. Starting to really blur these lines between artistic collage and architectural drawing. Some of their earlier work even became concept renderings or presentation renderings, in this case a one-point perspective that follows the horizon line and all of the vanishing points and things like that. So combining portions of this elevation perspective and collage clippings, pretty forward-thinking and kind of whimsical for its time, but in fact predates some of the more digital collage methods that we use today in Photoshop. And when we populate a rendering, whether we extract that from SketchUp or Rhino or another 3D software, we often take pieces and parts of digital models and then combine them with the pre-existing skies and pre-existing cutouts of people. So very interesting that this collage from 1970 predates digital collage rendering styles some 50 years later. It's the exact methods that we use today when we do digital renderings. Other artists I think are worth looking at. Louise Nevelson, she was a fantastic sculptor from the mid to late 70s. If you are from the Cincinnati area, please go see one of her wonderful examples of sculpture, relief sculpture, cabinet sculpture. These are cabinet or furniture size sculptures that are hung on the wall. But Nevelson is also known for her public art, but some of her collage work and sculpture work, this what I would call relief sculpture or cabinet sculpture, hangs on the wall. Really interesting combination of found objects and then all painted, in this case black or dark matte gray, and hung on the wall. So if you're from the Cincinnati area, do go see some of her work at the Cincinnati Art Museum. Cincinnati Art Museum is a fantastic free museum just north of Mount Adams neighborhood, so do check out some of her work if you're from that area. Nevelson, as I mentioned, also has some larger public art sculpture works, but very interesting collage artist as well, prolific collage artist from the 1970s. Interesting that Nevelson also bridged over into interior design. This example here from the 1980s You can see her collage work, her sculpture work combined into the portions of the altar for this chapel, as well as different wall hangings and installations for this very intimate but very effective chapel. So, very interesting combination of collage, sculpture, and interior design. The Dada movement was another type of artistic collaboration or collaborative movement, or a group of artists working to really question a lot of the societal norms and the technological norms and a lot of the different things that came out of sort of the stress and the pain of rapid industrialization, as well as some of the living conditions in some of these crowded cities of industrial Europe, but also some of the nonsense and some of the pain and suffering and stress that came out of World War I. So Dada as a movement really started to question a lot of the norms in art and in sculpture and in design. And so collage became one of their more prolific methods of creating these meditations and these questions of where modern society was really going, coming out of the ashes of World War I. And so if you're interested in this particular movement, the Dada movement, has a lot of interesting and forward-thinking, but also sometimes subversive and challenging images in which they are really questioning where society was going after the stress of World War I. Back into the 1970s, Terry Gilliam, the animator, artist, and the only American to be a member of the Monty Python comedy troupe, prolific animation artist, doing a lot of the animation and collage sequences for Monty Python's Flying Circus, the television series from the BBC, as well as some of their feature films. You may be familiar with The Meaning of Life, The Life of Brian, as well as Monty Python Holy Grail. So Terry Gilliam has been a very prolific film director in the years since, but used collage methods to create some of the more whimsical and funny sequences that became known in both the film and television series. You may know his directorial work for the film 12 Monkeys. On the architectural drawing side, Los Angeles design firm by the name of Morphosis, led by Thom Mayne. Thom Mayne has lectured here at Ball State at Bruce Hall a couple of years ago. We have his entire talk available on our CAP guest lecture series YouTube site. But pretty common or pretty direct notion for some of their methods, that bridge between model photography, architectural drawing, and collage. It's hard to decipher here, but there's a plan, there's, I think, a portion of a section, and there's a perspective in the form of the model, kind of all collaged together using transparency, line drawing, some interesting exposure film here, or other aspects of photography. This might be a composite from some pre-existing photographs. This conceptual idea for Park Pavilion. We can see another photograph, perhaps longer distance of the model, and then it's a little bit of magazine imagery kind of notched in here. So there's actually 5 or 6 images in one kind of coming together, but it's a common notion to for some presentation drawing and for competition drawings to start to find ways of combining different architectural drawings together, and then having them almost become pieces of art onto themselves, above and beyond what the architectural drawing might even be communicating. And it can be difficult to read, but the longer you look at it, you just start to decipher some things. There's a little north arrow right here, for instance, and this dashed lines typically indicate overhead planes, so this might be an entry canopy. We can see a little staircase right in here. We can see a series of rooms and pathways and ramping and different things like that. So as one begins to learn how to read architectural drawings, the complexity here becomes a little bit less daunting. Nonetheless, the composite image is very, very interesting and very rich. The more traditional ones, this is from architect Helmut Jahn, who practices out of Chicago. If you're familiar with Chicago, several landmark buildings by Helmut Jahn. But this is this is an interesting perspective in that it's pulled over, or it's taking the building volume and pulling it up so we can understand the lower ranks here. These are train tracks coming in, and this is a building built over a portion, I believe, of Chicago's Union Station, very close to the Board of Trade, as I recall. And so it has a lot of different things it's trying to do in terms of communicating the skyscraper or the landmark tower, some of the infrastructure of portions of the train tracks coming in, and then how these lower levels interact with the upper levels of the building. So some interesting dynamic ways of combining drawing with some diagrammatic methods, as well as some pull-away perspective and other complex issues that are happening here. This is another competition board, if you will, submitted by the firm of Williams and Chen. Billy Chen has been here as well. She was our distinguished guest lecturer about 2 years ago here at Bruce Hall at Ball State. Again, her entire talk is available on our YouTube page. But a very interesting way of approaching a design competition or project. We've got a series of collaged perspective sketches or views up here. We've got the design statement or the artist statement printed here. And while they were not allowed to submit models for this, they decided to blur the line between drawing and model. So this is kind of what we might call a drawdle. So we've got a building section here. We've got a one-point perspective here, and another building section here in which the elements are projecting directly off of the surface. So a careful way of combining basswood, either with a laser cutter or by hand methods, and combining a lot of these different drawings together to create this very interesting drawdle. Other examples, late 1980s, wonderful architect by the name of Tadao Ando. If you're not familiar with his work, do become familiar with his work. A self-taught, self-trained architect out of Japan who really, I think, pushes the different lines of poetics in some of his work. Two Christian churches that he did in Japan, one called Church of the Water, the other called Church of the Light. And these are some of the presentation drawings that combine very early CAD work from the time with these Prismacolor pencil drawings on mat board. So that combination of some of the more technical looking types of pieces here with these hidden line CAD perspectives, as well as the more artistic notions of plan and section built up here with Prismacolor. Other examples, this is another example of different drawings coming together along with model photography, so building the model, photographing it, cutting it, and then laying it into a drawing. This might be a site section. I think this looks to me to be either a diametric or an exploded diametric. So this would be the front facade of the building. Actually, I'm gonna correct myself. This, I believe, is an elevation oblique. So this would be the front facade of the building here. This might be overlaid perhaps with a portion of the site plan. You can see an entry sequence here with the stairs and a canopy here. So yeah, this looks to be elevation oblique, either exploded or stacked. So the house is sitting here on its site, and then you can see how they've combined in photographs of the model to start to communicate different aspects of it. So again, collage can be a very interesting way of presenting a project by looking at different views, different drawings, and different portions of a project laying together on a single drawing. Another one that's a little bit more straightforward. This I believe was a housing addition that began with a single photograph. So an existing photograph of someone's kitchen, and then by affixing that to a piece of paper and then making a drawing from that starts to illustrate the concept for the housing addition, second story, and so forth. So a very straightforward way of saying, oh, here's your house now, and here's how we might add on to it or modify it. But using the exact perspective lines and then blurring directly out of the photograph into the proposed drawing. Nice, very simple but very rich example of this blurring between architectural drawing and collage. The 90s were a wonderful time for us in terms of being designers and graphic designers. And you can see this element of early digital collage that was probably done in an early version of Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop. This combination of digital imagery and text and photographs and different effects. So it was a wonderful time just in terms of design, innovation, and different movements of and styles of design and graphic design. Another early example of what used to be known as ArchiCAD, I think it's still around actually, but an early version of 3 different perspective views, then cut and laid in with Photoshop. This is actually a film still from a Peter Sellers film. These are photographs of San Francisco, but the idea that this house would capture these different views of San Francisco through its window treatments, really clever and very effective way of using some cutting methods and early Photoshop and early CAD to describe the different views and dynamics of this proposed house. A friend of mine, Salahuddin, who teaches down at Kennesaw State in Atlanta, author of a great book called Composite Drawing. You can find that book on the shelf in the library downstairs. His collage methods are really quite rich. You can see the plans down in here. You can see looks to be, I believe, a cutaway axonometric of the house, a couple of isometrics of an early, probably preliminary computer model, some interior perspectives, all collaged together, and using these construction lines or leader lines to combine these different aspects together. Again, and the big splash of color really makes for, I think, a very interesting and rich presentation style drawing that can really begin a presentation or really land an interview or help really communicate the project to a wider audience. More examples of graphic design announcing a more high profile project. These were some of the presentation renderings for the Staples Center. So NBBJ is a large firm that specializes in sports facilities. These were a combination here of the plan, the section, perspective, early sketches on yellow trace paper, and graphic design and titles. So a really, I think, rich and direct way of presenting the different floors or the different levels of the project in an interesting way, using that 1990s style of graphic design, of collage graphic design. So you know the Staples Center as being the home of the Lakers, the Clippers, and the Kings, including some of the best years of the late Kobe Bryant. But a very interesting collage method that the firm used to, again, combine section with plan and even model photography into these presentation boards for the project. Multi-million-dollar project, as you know. Other smaller ones, we've got interesting combinations here of sections, character sketches, perhaps some elevations or details for this project. Simple composite drawing of pencil and watercolor. More artistic versions here, interesting combinations of painting and photography and architectural drawing on clapboard panels, very vivid, rich colors. Ginny Herzog, she's a prolific artist, really wonderful captured effects. These, I believe, are elevations and or interior elevations, I think combined with photography and with paint. Again, on clapboard panels. Clapboard is a type of illustration board that has a slight thin layer of clay that really grips paint and Prismacolor pencils and even gouache or even watercolor. But a rich example here, I think, of these different line drawings and or elevations or interior elevations combined with paint makes for a very rich collage method. New friend of mine on Instagram, Patrizio Martinelli. He's an Italian architect who teaches at University of Miami, Ohio. You can follow him on Instagram. Prolific sketcher and prolific sketchbook keeper. You can see examples here of collage right in his sketchbook. This is a little ode here to Corbusier. There's Le Corbusier there sitting there in the gondola. Combination here of the map of Venice that he probably photocopied and pasted in, along with some pencil drawing and even stencil work. Le Corbusier had a pretty standard font that he used for all of his projects that's available in stencil form. A lot of folks still use that particular font today. But collage can be a really effective method of journaling and sketchbook keeping as you take images and pieces from your travels. Or portions of black paper and stencils and things like that, and then start to paste them together in your sketchbook. So do free yourself away from the idea that a sketchbook is just line art. It could very well be a very rich composite keeping of line art notes, as well as journaling and collaging. So grab a glue stick or roll of tape and start taping stuff into your sketchbook to activate some of your thinking and some of your memory. And your sketchbook then can be a wonderful record of your design process as well as some of your travels. Patrizio uses that same thinking to develop some of his presentation work for his courses. This is an existing building, I believe, in Milan, called the Triennale. It's a museum in the middle of a park, if I remember Milan correctly. This is a monumental gate over here. So he's combining, using collage methods, a portion of the city plan. You know this figure ground method here from our Invisible Cities studies, combining it with photographs of the existing building, both interior photographs as well as exterior. A little bit of drawing involved here. And some color and material studies, and even this might be a computer model or a physical model combined with a plan. So a way of recalling existing buildings or communicating existing buildings. Collage here is being used to really present different aspects of a particular existing project. Looks like the building is actually right here, very close to the Sforza Castle here in Milan. Another example of this work, we've got an axonometric drawing here, a portion of an elevation, some cutouts of people. This looks to be Milan again, I believe. Some interior photography as well as some model photography, all combined together on a single presentation board. So again, that notion of taking collage methods and color and cutting and layering together to really evoke an architectural project. This is another existing building. This is called the Cataneo House. This is in Como, Italy, small town just north of Milan. We have taken students there. Professor Spodek and myself took 22 students there back in 2005. We were located on a job site just one block from this house. But again, a combination of model photography, existing photography, interior photography cut together. You can see this rather older map or plan here, and then we call this an exploded axonometric from the plan to this axonometric view and then the upper floors. So this, again, you can present an entire project on a single panel this way by using collage and by using color, by using interesting, clever methods of cutting and layering and pasting together. It's a very interesting way of creating presentation level quality renderings and drawings for your projects. A little bit of a side here. Paul Lewis was part of our guest lecture series for the fall semester. Paul Lewis is principal of Lewis, Ceramaki and Lewis, or LTL Architects. They published a book called Manual of Section that really studied a lot of the great buildings of our time in sectional view. Interesting working method that they used to create these different sections, but they did these drawings of existing buildings. It's the Guggenheim Museum by Frank Lloyd Wright in New York, for instance, to really help people study the buildings in a new way. And if you didn't see his talk, I will provide a link to your instructor here that they can share on Canvas. that takes you through the entire history and journey of how this particular design firm developed this book and why sections are so important to their practice and so important to understanding architectural space. Back to Patrizio, his quote, "The section is the generator of space." When he begins a project, and he's doing a lot of sketching now on the iPad, he begins with the section. And as an architect and interior designer, he feels that the section is really where a project really should begin. A lot of us generate projects beginning in plan, or we might do a study model, or we might do a diagram. Really think about thinking about how you can start this project in a section, or how you can study your current project in section. Jump over that as soon as you can, so you don't get stuck in plan. Getting stuck in plan can lead to projects that perhaps not as dynamic spatially, and so very important to jump over and start sketching some sections of how your project sits on your site. That's why we showed you the importance of looking at the elevation profile of your site in Google Earth in a previous video, and why we feel that sections are such an important way of studying space and the dynamics of space and the activities that people will be doing in your socially distant project. So here's an example of a project that wasn't for a client or for anything really. Patrizio, like myself, I mean, we sometimes just sketch things just for the fun of it, just because we want to study different spaces and different forms, or study different site types or building types. You know, I'll in my sketchbook sometimes I'll be drawing buildings or gardens or little parks or little plazas, just for fun. And so we hope that as you grow as a designer, that you might start to do that as well. So here's an idea that started with, it looks like, with a smaller computer drawing, and then he drew over it, excuse me, in Morpholio Trace, which is a program available for the iPad. He then pulls these leader lines down and starts to generate the plan. So great example here of a little sketch project that began in section and then evolved in plan, not the other way around. So this notion of starting with some basic measurements, a basic concept or a basic diagram, going into section and then pulling the plan off of it might be another way of approaching your design process. For the development of that, this was the initial sketches. He then did more refined versions of those. Again, he's also a teacher over at Miami, Ohio, so he's doing these examples for his students and sharing with them on an online teaching or hybrid fashion, just like we are here. But you can see here examples of maybe some clip art or a little bit of tonal value here. The idea that this might be a space that's cut by section here, this might be a dome, but that there are elements that exist behind the section cut itself. He then refines these sketches in, it looks to be Morpholio Trace, which is, again, a software for the iPad, and then even lays in using some of their stencil operations, which are available in the program, to stencil in or collage in landscape graphics into the background. So all this can be done now on the iPad. So it still has a very much a hand-drawn kind of feel, but the more advanced notions of the Apple Pencil and the iPad Pro and some of these sketching programs are really starting to really enliven and enrich the sketching experience and the design process. Examples of Unit 5 from previous years. These are portfolio pages from Jackson Haynes. Jackson is currently on internship. He's in middle of third and fourth year now in the Department of Architecture, but this was his final project from his fall semester. A little bit longer. We were of course on campus, and so we had more opportunity to build models, incorporate public art or sculpture. This is an Alexander Calder sculpture here, supposedly, hypothetically, located along the White River Levee here in Muncie, Indiana, very close to the Minnetrista campus. Master plan here, students were working in groups, so we had several phases, including a master plan phase. And then his final presentation board, which has a combination of a perspective view, a sectional view here through a pavilion, and the art itself, another one-point perspective here, and then the site plan kind of all collaged together on one panel. I believe this was an 18 by 36 piece of foam core. Actually, it was trace paper stretched over foam core. So as you start to think about what your final drawings might be for this, and what materials do we use, and well, you could very well do this on a series of 8.5 by 11s. You could do this on a couple of 11 by 17s. But as you'll find, if you go to a CVS or a Walgreens, there's poster board available. There's some foam core available. There's white poster board. All of that can fit on a single panel, and just whatever you have available to you, wherever you are in your home life, do check out some of the basic office supplies that are available at a CVS or a Walgreens or a Walmart, and just pull off a piece of poster board and start to think about how you can collage together some of the standard presentation drawings that we might use to communicate design. Again, Jackson here has combined a site plan with a site section. You can see down through the river to the levee and the water. And he's got more of an aerial perspective here, and he's got a street level or eye level perspective. So they're all kind of collaged together on the single panel, communicate all the aspects of the project that he wanted to communicate above and beyond what the model could. And so in lieu of building a model or spending a lot of time on that, we encourage you to really think about presenting this as a series of drawings. Another example from some of our previous offerings, it harkens back perhaps to that example of what I call the drawdle from Williams and Chen. This is a collage relief model. This is some foam core here, so there's a little bit of texture to this. But we felt that it was really, really effective. This is in fact not a section, it is a section perspective. You can see, because you can see the staircases here vanishing to a 1-point vanishing point. So use your judgment and creativity here, but I think there's some really wonderful opportunities here to take collage and section, or even section perspective, or combining different drawings together and some color and things like that. So start clipping magazines and coupon books and junk mail and food containers and cereal boxes and all that stuff you have lying around the house. I mean, if you're getting as much shipping material as I have, I'm getting mail every day now with all kinds of great stuff that could very well be cut up and used in collage. But do start collecting some of those different colors and different images from coupon books or junk mail or magazines or newspapers lying around the house, and start to think about how they could start to inform a collage. So do move towards that, and think about a final presentation style board that could combine a couple of these different things. At the minimum, a collaged section through your site that really communicates some of the different spaces of your final project that you're after. So, thank you.